Thank you for the flowers.
Liam.
Yeah, I take one,
My
you take one.
bag.
No.
Liam.
The world is still reeling from the news that a member of the pop supergroup One Direction died at the young age of 31. We're talking about Liam Payne, who apparently fell to his death from the balcony of his hotel in Argentina. As millions of fans mourn his loss, new details about what was happening in the hours leading up to his fatal fall are coming to light. We're going to bring on forensic investigator Joseph Scott Morgan to sort this all out. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. We are learning more information about the tragic and shocking death of One Direction band member Liam Payne. And it's our understanding that the circumstances surrounding his fall from a third-floor balcony at Casa Sur Palermo in Buenos Aires is being treated as a, quote, dubious death by local officials. Now, although it appears that Payne was alone in his hotel room when he died, a preliminary report states that the musician and singer may have been, quote, going through some type of outbreak resulting from substance abuse, and we're going to talk about that. That theory seems to be backed up by an initial toxicology report, which was just recently released. So to talk about it, I want to bring in forensic death investigator from Jacksonville State University and host of the Body Bags podcast, Joseph Scott Morgan. Joseph, thank you so much for coming on. Good to see you.
You bet, Jesse. Thanks for having me.
So here is what we know, and I'll lay it out and then we'll talk about it. Here's what we know or seem to know about what happened on October 16th. A hotel employee called the emergency line saying that there was a guest who was under the influence of drugs and alcohol, who had destroyed objects in his room. The employee reportedly told emergency services that we need to send someone with urgency because I don't know if the guest's life is in danger because he is in a room with a balcony and we're afraid he could do something that threatens his life. But by the time first responders got there, just a few minutes later, reportedly only 7 minutes, this is according to the director of Buenos Aires' Emergency Medical Services, Payne had fallen 3 stories and died from absolutely catastrophic injuries. His body was found in an inner courtyard of the hotel. Now, police described the room as being in complete disarray. They did find several things were broken, lots of different over-the-counter drugs, as well as the medication clonazepam, maybe more commonly known as Klonopin, were found in his belongings. And forensic teams, they also reportedly found a whiskey bottle, a lighter, a cell phone, all in the courtyard where Payne's body was discovered. Hey guys, I just want to thank you for following the Liam Payne story with us. And look, one of the reasons we're able to bring you these kinds of stories, to go in depth about these stories, is because we have amazing support from our sponsors. And I have to call out one in particular right now, Morgan & Morgan. If you're injured, America's largest injury law firm, maybe who you want in your corner. They have an incredible track record of multi-million-dollar verdicts and settlements. I mean, recently they secured verdicts of $6.8 million in New York, $12 million in Florida, $26 million in Philadelphia. Mind you, these are all considerably higher than the highest insurance offers in these cases. And even if your case isn't worth millions of dollars, Morgan & Morgan will fight for what you deserve. There's no upfront fee. The whole process can be done straight from your smartphone. Seeing if you have a case can only take 8 clicks or less. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar. Joseph, before you even get into the results of the preliminary toxicology tests, what can investigators learn right off the bat from that scene?
Well, you know, when you go into a scene like this, Jesse, and you've got broken items, remember one of our boilerplate things, you've said this, I've heard you say this on the air before, actually. We always say there's no signs of forced entry or struggle. Well, this ticks the box relative to struggle, because when you're walking in there, you're thinking that there's been a fight, perhaps things have been thrown about. And most of the time you don't necessarily think about an individual that is high or impaired by drugs breaking all of the items in there. I mean, this almost goes back, you think about the way the 70s rock bands lived, where they would destroy a room. And a lot of that is, some of it's real, some of it's not. But when you walk in and you're a hotel employee and you look around and you see these things destroyed, you're thinking, well, what in the world could... And here's another piece to this, is that this employee obviously saw something relative to this that troubled them as far as behavior goes. And so that's a big piece to this. You can you begin to think, well, what would be the motivation for this,
Right.
for this kind of acting out behavior in the space?
Well, let's explore that because Payne's body was reportedly transported to the morgue and there was an
Mhm.
autopsy that was performed, and the medical examiners requested histopathological,
Mhm.
biochemical, and toxicology testing. That is a mouthful.
Right.
What is the difference, Joseph, between
Well,
those three?
yeah, the histio is actually the examination of the tissues, and this is going to give you the beauty of this is that everybody's seen the idea of us doing an actual autopsy portrayed on television where we're actually examining the organs and we'll be cutting the organs. We take sections out of those, and there's two areas that are going to be very important, actually three that are going to be very, very important here to kind of gauge what's going on as you look through the microscope at these tissues. First off, the heart. How have any of these substances impacted? And he's a young man, Jesse.
Hmm.
You begin to look at the heart. One of the things that you'll see is something called left ventricular hypertrophy, which means that there's like a thickening of uh, of of the chamber wall. It thickens, and one of the reasons it thickens is generally because of drug-induced hypertension. You got high blood pressure. The heart is like racing like this all the time. It's like working a muscle out, and it thickens and it thickens, and so that compromises the heart's ability to work. And then you're going to look at the brain, with the brain tissue. Has there been, can you appreciate any kind of changes in his brain that might lead back to drug interaction? We can see, particularly with things like meth, microscopically over a period of time, if you've been exposing yourself to it, um, you can see they're microscopic changes in the brain. So those are, just from the histopath section, that's going to be huge. It doesn't surprise me. There's a little bit lost in translation here. uh, I read one article that said that it was a partial autopsy, and then that's translated to, well, they're not completely done yet. And so in our country, we would say, yeah, an autopsy was done, and we're still awaiting further testing. Well, they've already gotten some of the tests back. That's where the toxicology comes in.
Just real quick, what do you think is missing? And I'm about to go into the injuries, but what do you think they could be missing if it's not a full autopsy?
I don't necessarily. Isn't it interesting? They have an awareness of who this is. Okay, make no mistake about it. And and then you think about, well, they're going to try to overturn every rock that they can because they don't
Sure,
want the
sure.
spotlight on them. So they are being extra careful and extra thorough, if you will, and they're really taking their time because when you when we think about this cocktail, which is what it is that he was allegedly using, then there's any manner of things that you want to search for
Right.
because you don't know no no two of these combinations that they refer to as pink cocaine.
I want to get to that. I want to get to that, the
Right, right.
toxicology reports in a minute. But before we even
Yeah.
do, just going back to the physical injuries, the forensic experts, they reportedly found 25 injuries that were compatible with those caused by falling from a height. So that's according to the autopsy. And the report
Yeah.
also said that craniocerebral lesions were adequate enough to cause death, while internal and external hemorrhages in the skull, thorax, abdomen, and limbs, they contributed to the mechanism of death. Real quick takeaway from that, Joseph.
Yeah, I do have a problem with this, okay, because you cannot say that 25 injuries, individual injuries, are associated with a fall from this height. Now, I'm
Mm,
buying, if you're selling, you've got a single point of impact. Because let's just think about it. If you think about dropping an object, let's just say if we dropped a bag of flour off of a 3-story balcony, there'll be the part that you can appreciate in that bag of flour where it rips, because that's the point of impact. Now they're saying he's got 25 different injuries that are associated with a fall. How does that happen? Now, if you were falling down a flight of stairs, I'd buy that, okay, because you're bouncing off, you're pinballing off. Some of these things are interlocked.
right.
That
Are
that
you
kind
are
of
you suggesting that perhaps these injuries happened before the fall?
Yeah, yeah, they could, and that's why it's so important that when we examine injuries in the morgue, we might see them at the scene, but when you get it under the surgical lighting in the morgue, you pick up on things. Here's the big thing, Jesse, is you want to be able to try to understand the age of these injuries. And that's why literally in the morgue, we dissect the injuries externally where we will actually trim into them or cut into them. And if you've got an area of, say, a contusion, fancy word for a bruise, we all know the stages of coloration with a bruise. Well, if you've got a yellow bruise on you, that's not recent.
But just to couple that for a second, if
Yeah.
he was injured minutes before the fall, you wouldn't be able to tell the time frame between minutes.
No, that'd be
It'd have to
much
be a
more
few
difficult.
days or something like that, right?
Yeah, and so what I would begin to look for relative to these other kind of peripheral injuries that they're referring to, Jesse, is patterns. So
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
just say you fall off of a structure and there's a concrete or cobblestone below. That's going to leave a specific impact pattern. Well, is he punching the wall? Is he jamming his shoulder into the wall? I don't know what's broken in there. Does he have glass cuts? Those sorts of things. So then you begin to look for patterns to try to understand what happened. Because you got a big piece to this. You've got a busted up room, okay? And then you've got this great fall from a height, so that's 30 feet roughly, give or take, that you're falling from. And I don't know what the surface was like that he struck, and that's going to play a big role in it as well.
Now I want to go into the toxicology
Yeah.
results, which is important. So according to sources, Payne had a lot of substances in his system when he died. Those included cocaine, benzodiazepine, crack, the party drug known as pink cocaine that Joseph mentioned. And we've talked about pink cocaine before. It's also referred to as Tusi. It's one of the drugs, by the way, that Sean Combs is accused of not only using, but also allegedly forcing others to move for him. And actually, in a recent lawsuit, Young Miami has accused Combs of having her transport Tusi for him on private planes. According to an NYU Medical School report that was published in 2023, Tusi is usually a combination of a lot of different drugs: ketamine, ecstasy, meth, opioids, other psychoactives. It actually rarely contains just cocaine. This is according to experts. The pink dye, the food coloring, it's usually added for aesthetic purposes, the way it looks. And pink cocaine is also believed to have been the cause of a massive high-speed crash in Miami in August that we talked about here on Sidebar. This self-proclaimed Instagram model allegedly ran a red light while going up to 80 miles per hour, slamming her car into another car, caused a chain car reaction. Two men who had been on their way to work were killed. And in body cam video from the scene, the woman, the suspect, Macy Lathers, can be seen rolling around on the ground, saying she was from the future, that she had a crystal ball. According to the Florida Poison Control Center, Tusi can cause things like racing heart rate, increased blood pressure, stroke, seizures. It's been popular in Europe and Latin America for a while. Its use in the United States is just increasing. This is according to the DEA. And last summer, it apparently was the #1 narcotic that Customs and Border Protection officers were finding when they busted international passengers. So Joseph Liam Payne apparently had pink cocaine in his system. It can already cause all these issues, but then you couple it with more drugs, or more perceived drugs, or alleged drugs in his system, plus the bottle of alcohol I mentioned. What does all this do? What does all this do to a person?
Yeah, I reflect back, to the days that life seemed like it was more simpler. But, you think about with Belushi, where, he's doing speedballs, and that was a combination of, cocaine and heroin that he was injected with. This was apparently smoked. I've seen one report that is alleging that he was smoking this concoction with a pipe, which is, we think back to the days of, say, for instance, crack cocaine use, and this idea we would find homemade pipes everywhere. So this creates a particular problem toxicologically, because we do in toxicology, Jesse, we do both uh, qualitative and quantitative. So you can say, and you and I have had this discussion, you can look at a case and say, well, this is present. We've got ketamine, we've got MDMA, ecstasy. We might have benzos in there. Oh, we've got cocaine. There's heroin. You can qualify it, but it takes much longer to quantify it. And then you have to break these elements down, which is even more complex, to understand the levels in each one. And when these things are being manufactured like this, where they're putting together the pink cocaine. You don't know if the portions, to put it in layman's terms, are the same over and over and over again. They're not. Okay. So you don't know which drug is going to be the most overwhelming drug. But back to this young woman that was in the crash. And just remind me again, you said that she was rolling around on the ground
Yeah.
outside of the vehicle,
Yep.
correct?
Yep.
So with, two of these drugs that are found in this combo are powerful hallucinogens. Okay. And you think about things like ketamine, which is actually used in anesthesia. You think about there's another element that's contained in here that was first synthesized back in the mid 70s, and they saw it as a hallucinogen then that could be treated for psychiatric problems. And of course, it never worked out. But they have all of these on board, and not to mention the properties that things like cocaine bring with it. And you've got this kind of juxtaposition where these drugs are kind of fighting with one another. And you see this bizarre behavior that people will exhibit, at a scene. So all of those indicators are there. I think the most troubling thing about this is that Tusi is this insidious problem they've had in Europe for a while. Remember what you mentioned about Diddy, that the stuff's being flown in, perhaps allegedly, we don't know. They've had a problem with there and in South America. You don't know the origin of the stuff and what other agents might be contained in each substance. And then
I mean,
who are
that's
you
the same
getting?
thing with fentanyl. That's the same thing with fentanyl.
You're absolutely, it's the same template. But then here's the other one little bit. You don't know who you're acquiring the stuff from.
Yeah.
And so I go back to the trauma. I go back to the state of the room that he was found in.
And that brings me to another point about this investigation. Now, to be clear, we don't know exactly how much of the drugs were in Liam Payne's blood when he died. This could be why we don't have the full results, as investigators say. But authorities, they are investigating how exactly Payne was able to get his hands on these drugs. A hotel employee may have sold him the drugs. He was interviewed by police. There's been no arrests or charges yet. We shall see. Payne, though, I should tell you, he has spoken before about his struggles with mental health and addiction. In fact, on a podcast in 2021, he said he hit rock bottom when One Direction broke up in 2016. In 2023, he announced he had gone to rehab, that he was more than 100 days sober. An anonymous friend told the Daily Mail that Liam had been sober before he died, but that the drug dealers had been preying on him. Now, the outlet The Mirror is also reporting that 2 female escorts came to Payne's room on the day that he died, but there was seemingly a disagreement over payment, and they left him after having drinks. They say they didn't do any drugs with him, but the women have reportedly been questioned. They're not considered suspects in any way. And Payne's father, Jeff, flew to Buenos Aires after his son's death. He visited the growing memorial outside of the hotel, and according to a news release, he told police that he would do anything he could to help with their investigation. British officials, though, I should tell you, have also offered their assistance since Liam Payne was a British citizen. So, Joseph, as you think about the next steps and who they're investigating and this interplay between authorities in Buenos Aires and British authorities, what are you going to be looking for? What is the interplay here? What are the next steps?
Okay, so here's a big piece of this from an evidentiary standpoint. They're saying that there was pink cocaine there. I don't think that they're necessarily getting that from the tox results. They're physically seeing something, maybe residue. So therefore, you have that standalone marker in time. You can analyze that. Then you go back to who you think may have sold it to them, and you press them hard. You press them very, very hard about all of their activities relative to this behavior, the sale of it, and have they witnessed anything with Liam? And also, were they trying to shake him down? Remember, he's a celeb. The perception is that all celebrities have tons of money. Okay. And you can actually track chemically back to a particular batch with this. So that's going to be interesting to kind of understand. And it sounds like he's dealing with a whole groups of shady characters. If you've got if people are just saying in reports that there's multiple people trying to sell him drugs, or that,
Yeah.
they're attempting to, and then he's got escorts coming to the room. You don't know who's controlling. He's in a foreign land, all right? And you don't know all of the nuances that might be going on there either. It is going to be fascinating to watch this from afar.
And it's heartbreaking. There has been just
It
an
is.
outpouring of sorrow. I mean, One Direction, to give you an example, aside from all the fans, the memorials and the outpouring of heartache, but the group, One Direction, they released a joint statement on Instagram saying, we're completely devastated by the news of Liam's passing in time. When everyone is able to, there will be more to say, but for now, we'll take some time to grieve and process the loss of our brother, who we love dearly. The memories we shared with him will be treasured forever. We've heard things from Justin Bieber as well. And by the way, Payne had shared a 7-year-old son with former X Factor judge and British girl group member Cheryl Cole. And Cole has said that she's horrified that one day their son, Bear, will be confronted with what she said are salacious news reports surrounding his death, and have to deal with not only losing his father, but having the investigation play out on the world stage. So it becomes really important to get to the bottom of what happened here, but also not move into conspiracy theories, not move into falsehoods. So it's going to be really important to see. And again, just a tragedy all around. Joseph Scott Morgan, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate you coming on. Check out the Body Bags podcast, everybody. Joseph, thank you.
Thank you, Jesse.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.